Back in 1995, a man named Mark Winger was hailed as a hero in his community. He had defended his wife from a violent intruder, an act of incredible courage born from an unthinkable tragedy. But what no one knew was that over the next few years, that heroic story would be picked apart, piece by piece, revealing a truth that was so much more sinister than anyone could have possibly imagined. And that brings us to this really chilling question. Can the person everyone thinks is a hero actually be the villain? What happens when that line between victim and perpetrator just completely blurs and the real truth has been hiding in plain sight the entire time? All right, so to really understand how this all unraveled, we have to go back to the beginning. Let's look at the official story, the version of events that everyone, the police, the public, believed was the truth on that awful day. The whole thing started with a really frightening encounter. Just days after Donna Winger had reported a shuttle driver, Roger Harrington, for some truly bizarre behavior, a frantic 911 call came in from her husband, Mark. When police got there, they walked into an absolute bloodbath. Donna was dead, bludgeoned with a hammer, and Harrington was also dead from gunshot wounds. Now, Mark Winger's story seemed pretty straightforward and honestly heroic. He told the police he was down in the basement when he heard a struggle. He grabbed his gun, ran upstairs, and saw Roger Harrington viciously attacking his wife Donna with a hammer. He said he had no choice. He had to shoot the attacker to try and save her. So in this version, Mark is the grieving hero, and Harrington, who had a known history of mental health problems, was the psychotic aggressor out for revenge. And in the aftermath, Mark Winger became the face of this tragic heroism. He wrote letters to the local paper, thanking the community for their support, and he gave these heart-wrenching statements. I mean, the entire town's sympathy was with him, this man who lost his wife and was forced to take a life just to protect her. For years, that was the story. The case was officially closed, the story set in stone. But now let's jump forward in time and see how this perfect story of heroism started to show its first very critical cracks. 4 years. I mean, think about that. For 4 whole years, the official story held up. Mark Winger, the tragic hero, grieved, he moved on, he even remarried. For the police, for the public, this case was a closed chapter, just a painful memory locked away. But truth? Well, it has a funny way of not staying buried. And then, the bombshell dropped. Donna's own best friend, a woman named Deanne Schultz, was suffering from a deep depression. She told her doctor it was rooted in a dark secret, and she confessed. She'd been having an affair with Mark Winger, both before and after his wife was murdered. That revelation, right there, was enough for investigators to reopen the case. So now, with the affair giving them a powerful new motive, investigators went back and looked at the original evidence, but with fresh eyes. And suddenly, all these small details that seemed insignificant before started to look like glaring inconsistencies. A neighbor remembered hearing a long 5-minute pause between the 2 gunshots. On the 911 tape, Mark specifically says Harrington has a bullet in his head, singular. Well, you can actually hear a man groaning in the background. And maybe most importantly, the crime scene photos just didn't line up with the story Mark told. Okay, so armed with new suspicions and a pretty powerful motive, investigators turned to the silent witnesses of the crime, the physical evidence itself. They were hoping that forensic science could tell them what really happened inside that house. And the key that was going to unlock this whole thing was blood spatter analysis. Now, this technique is basically about reading the story that's been written in blood. The shape, the size, the location of every single drop can tell an expert exactly where the victim was, where the attacker stood, and how the violence actually unfolded. So when a world-renowned expert named Tom Bevel analyzed the evidence, Mark's story just completely fell apart. Let's break this down. Mark claimed Harrington was beating Donna, right? Well, there wasn't a single drop of her blood on Harrington's shirt. He said he fired the gun from the hallway, but the shell casing landed in a spot that made that physically impossible. And here's the most damning part. A specific type of blood spatter found on Mark's own sleeve proved he was standing right next to Donna during the attack, a detail he had always explicitly denied. So, here's the crucial point. The blood on the walls told a completely different story. The patterns prove that Donna wasn't attacked where Mark said she was. No, she was over by the front door, and she was struck from behind, as if she was desperately trying to flee her attacker. And that attacker? It wasn't Roger Harrington. Okay, So, if Mark's story was a total fabrication, what really happened that day? Using the forensic evidence as their guide, investigators started to piece together a truly chilling and deliberate plan. And then they found the final piece of the puzzle. Tucked away in Roger Harrington's car was a note. It had the Wingers' address and a specific meeting time, 4:30 p.m. This wasn't some random attack. Harrington had been invited. He was lured to his death. Prosecutors argued that Mark orchestrated the entire thing. He invited Harrington over, executed him with a shot to the head, and then, when his own wife Donna heard the noise and ran for her life, he murdered her too. That 911 call, it was pure theater. And that 5-minute pause the neighbor heard, that was the time Mark spent hanging up the phone, realizing his first victim was somehow still alive, and firing that final fatal shot. So why? Why would he do all this? Well, the motive was a trifecta of greed and lust. He wanted to be with his mistress, Diane. He stood to collect a $150,000 life insurance policy on Donna. And in an unbelievable act of arrogance, he was planning to sue the shuttle company for millions, using the very man he framed as the basis for his lawsuit. A plan that he thought was perfect, a plan that held up for 4 years, was finally undone. So let's look at the final outcome, where meticulous police work and impartial science brought the horrifying truth into the light. Mark Winger, the one-time community hero, was found guilty of the first-degree murders of both his wife, Donna, and the man he set up to be the villain, Roger Harrington. He was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole. And justice was also served for the second victim here. Roger Harrington's name was officially cleared. His family finally got confirmation of what they'd known all along. He wasn't a killer. He was an innocent man with a mental illness who was manipulated and murdered to be a pawn in someone else's diabolical scheme. You know, in the end, this case is such a powerful testament to the voice of forensic evidence. Like one expert said, the evidence doesn't lie. It has no bias. It doesn't have a motive. It just is what it is. It spoke for Donna Winger, and it spoke for Roger Harrington, unmasking a hero to reveal the killer underneath, and proving that sometimes the most monstrous truths are hidden behind the most convincing lies.